I learned about the loft at 4:06 a.m. from a fraud alert that insisted I had just co-signed a lease on a downtown unit I had never seen. The same notification showed my name affixed with a digital notary stamp and a stylized signature I recognized as my own from our mortgage documents, only crooked and too neat, like a photocopy that forgot to breathe. By 4:09 a.m., I was in the kitchen in the dim light of the stove clock, scouring emails I didn't remember authorizing, staring at a PDF that carried my initials in 3 places and a single question running for me in a loop. How does your life son away without you? We bought our house 2 summers ago, a brown stucco bungalow with a red door on 39th Avenue South in Minneapolis, 3 blocks from Minnehaha Creek. The yard is small and flat. The neighbor's maple leans just enough to overlay ours with leaves in the fall like confetti. I run a home refinishing business that turned into a hybrid to half e-commerce for cabinet hardware and finishes, half local jobs stripping tie-out kitchen doors until they look new. The garage smells like citrus stripper and lacquer even with the door open. I stack rails and stiles along the back wall in careful rows, economy and neatness because mistakes cost money. My wife, Lena, is a respiratory therapist at Hennepin County Medical Center. Her shifts swing like a pendulum, nights into days, weekends into weekdays, so our calendar is covered in neon sticky tabs to keep track. Blue for her, green for our daughter, orange for me. We are not rich. We are not broke. We are inside the stretch where daycare tuition and medical deductibles pull steady and quiet, like tow ropes on a car that keeps trying to roll backward. When I took on work to help my mechanic friend redo the spray booth at his shop off Hiawatha Avenue, the payment came late and in installments. The roof needed attention. The Subaru's check engine light was the patient's heartbeat monitor for 2 months, beeping its little orange warning. We didn't talk about money with drama, just fatigue. We both know what a $400 surprise does to an otherwise careful month. When I think back now, the first red flag wasn't a smell or a sentence. It was the Subaru's trip meter, reset out of habit like I do when I fill up. I remember filling at the Speedway on 42nd Street because their coffee always tastes like burnt toast and shame in a way I weirdly love. I set the trip to 0. By Thursday, I had driven to Knockhamus to pick up sandpaper to a client's place in Longfellow and back home. The digits should have read somewhere in the low 30s. They read 91. I assumed I had forgotten and done another job, then checked my calendar and saw that the afternoon I thought I was in the garage, I had indeed been home, pulling hinges off panels. I even found lacquer dust in the groove of my wedding ring, proof that I had stayed where I remembered. The second red flag did have a scent, a cologne that was sweet like artificial vanilla and stuck to the fabric of the passenger seat. I only noticed it because our daughter's car seat base is bolted in so tight that I usually hoist the carrier into place at the weird angle, my shoulder right up against the upholstery. It lingered even after the windows were down. When I washed the seat cover in the sink, the water ran grey with the faintest shimmer, the way fabric softener makes a slick you can't quite rinse away. Passwords crept. Her phone changed from open face to closed. My face no longer opened the banking app when we tried to buy grout at Home Depot because we had changed for security, she said. Overtime turned into I stayed late, which turned into we're short again, which turned into unexplained gaps that did not map to the HCNC portal where shift entries remain with the loyalty of bad tattoos. I wasn't a detective. I was just tired. When I asked about the trip meter and the overtime discrepancies, she said I always misread numbers when I'm stressed and reminded me of the time I paid the electric bill twice because I wasn't sleeping. That had happened. I had done that. Shame is a persuasive alibi. The lease alert broke through that fog because it dragged a third party into our house without consent. It included the building named Atlas Lofts on Washington Avenue near the light rail line, the same line that hums along Hiawatha past the river. The PDF had an e-notary seal from a service I recognized because our mortgage review had used something similar. It had my driver's license number and a scan of my signature from another document that I could place, the title of transfer when we bought the Subaru. File name used the date 2 days prior and a time late in the evening when I had been on a call with a client while standing in the garage. I cross-checked with the Ring camera I installed inside the garage, not the doorbell camera, another little white eye to keep an eye on expensive tools. It showed me at 8:37 p.m., blurring silent words into my phone, sawdust in my hair for 23 minutes. The e-notary timestamp said I signed at 8:41. I made 2 calls before sunrise and left 2 voicemails with different tones. The first was to our bank to freeze the card on file with any third-party notary services. The second was to the Atlas Lofts leasing office. I tried to make my voice confident and official in the second message and ended up sounding like a man trying to sublet his own life. I stepped out back with a mug of coffee that had gone cold and watched the slow stream of cars along 38th Street. The city is matic and waking. At 9:02 a.m., the leasing manager called me back. She was polite in the way people are when they know you're about to ask for something they cannot help. She told me the signer had provided an ID scan and remote notary that matched my estate record. She said the unit keys had already been picked up by a woman listed as an authorized occupant using a separate ID, the kind of detail that tries to be neutral while slicing you into better pieces. She said the rent would hit our joint account on the 1st of the month and that any disputes needed to go through the fraud process with the portal. She provided a case reference number that sounded like a license plate you immediately forget, LZ-3000. 175. I didn't go downtown. I couldn't. I went to the garage and pulled a fan out of the corner and then put it back. I tried to picture a reason. This was about a storage unit for work. She wanted to hide a surprise studio to take a certification exam in peace, something that would make me look small for doubting. I decided to wait until the evening because she had just come off a night shift and sleep makes new wounds less likely to bleed all over the day. At lunch, I drove to the U-Haul on Cedar Avenue because I remembered a gas receipt from my market app that flagged a discount from that address, and the day after the trip meter had leaped. It was a hunch, nothing more. The clerk behind the plexiglass asked for my phone number and then, like magic, the system pulled up a small storage unit, Ashburn 147 in my name, auto pay, $79.99 monthly, rented 3 months ago. I have never used a storage unit in my adult life. I asked if I could see it and was told that if I could prove I was me, Bone 147 was mine. The roll-up door hesitated like a secret order and then released with a hiss. Inside were 2 plastic totes labelled a winter and 1 banker's box labelled a kitchen. There were also 2 things that did not belong to any season or drawer, a manila envelope with a lease packet not for Atlas Lofts but for a different unit in the same building from last year, never executed, and a small set of keys on a red carabiner, the kind given by leasing offices everywhere. No furniture. No clothes. No love letters. Just the smell of corrugated cardboard and dust and a faint perfume I suddenly could name, the cheap sweet of a men's body spray I last smelled in a high school locker room. I set the keys back in the envelope because my hand had started to shake in a way that made any next step feel like a decision I could not reverse. I drove home with the envelope as if I could buckle it into a seat. The garage camera would later show me coming in and going out 3 times in 20 minutes because indecision looks like forgetfulness when you replay it. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter, then moved it to the top of the fridge, then slid it under the bread box as if hiding it would pause time like a child hiding behind a curtain thinks they vanish. We had promised our daughter we'd go to Longfellow Gardens after her nap to watch the ducklings skitter around the pool and pretend a little stone bridge was old Europe. The park is a small miracle between roads and rail, a place where the city lets you lie to yourself for an hour about quiet and permanence. On the way, Lena said that she had gotten a weird spam email about leases and not to open anything suspicious. I asked if she had ever been to Atlas Lofts. She said the name sounded like one of the grey buildings downtown that all looked the same at a glance. I said I got a fraud alert. She said I had been on edge lately in a way that made her want to hide emails to avoid conversations that always turned toward money. She said she was tired. She said she had a headache. She said a lot of things without saying one. In the back seat, our daughter sang a loop of vowels and I watched the light turn green and then stay red inside my chest. I spent 2 days proving I was not losing my mind to myself. I pulled the Subaru's OBD data into an app and looked at the GPS logs it quietly stores when paired with the Bluetooth scanner I use to clear codes when I'm stubborn. There were pings near Washington Avenue on 3 occasions that coincided with nights Lena said she had stayed late at the hospital. I matched those to our joint Easy Park logs and saw that once we paid street parking near a taco place I know serves kitchen employees until midnight. I matched the HNC shift portal and found that 2 of the nights had swaps listed, meaning she hadn't been there. A third entry showed she had clocked out at 11:12 p.m, which is not a thing you do on a night shift. The data didn't make a story. Stories make themselves with the words you choose. The data only made a fence I could lean against. I called the bank again and filed a claim that added another case number to my notes, this one from our credit union, FC-88,902. I froze the joint card to anything that tried to draft rent or new utilities. I opened a separate checking account in my own name for the business and routed the square deposits for cabinet orders because we had payroll coming and people who depend on me rarely know they depend on me. I set a password on the daycare pickup list so that anyone new trying to add a name would require my authorization in writing. Not because I thought someone planned to take our daughter, but because it was a simple lever I could pull that made me feel like the car wasn't rolling back on its own. Boundaries don't feel like fences until you press your hands against them and they hold. The public confrontation didn't happen because I staged it that way. It dragged itself onto a stage during an event built for children and small talk. The preschool held an open house on a Tuesday evening so kids could see their cubbies and parents could see each other's shoes. The art teacher put out finger paints. The director, a woman whose round glasses always look slightly fogged as if she moves too fast for the air, gave a speech about community that used words like village and scaffold while toddlers banged wooden blocks like cymbals. It should have been banal and lovely. It should have been 1 hour of bread hand soap and pretend kitchens and tiny chairs that trip every adult. I brought the manila envelope in my backpack because I had been carrying it everywhere the way people carry inhalers or epinephrine or talismans. I didn't intend to pull it out. Trigger was a parking alert ping on my phone at 6:41 p.m. Our frozen joint card was declined at Atlas Lofts for a 2-hour validation. A second ping followed immediately for a different card I had forgotten we had because it was a store card turned general card we never used. That one went through. The timestamp was precise. I could see our daughter trying to thread a plastic bead onto a string nearby. I could see Lena's back as she leaned over to read a schedule on the bulletin board. Someone inside me flipped a breaker. I stood among parents whose names I knew and some I hadn't learned yet. Without planning the words, I said that I needed to show her something. I didn't shout. My voice at the hospital whispered people adopt around sleeping patients. I held out the printouts from the GPS logs and the HCMC portal entries, a copy of the Atlas Lofts lease with my forged signature, the U-Haul storage unit contract in my name, and the receipt from that exact minute that had just hit my phone. I said I had frozen the cards and opened a separate account. I said a fraud case had been opened LZ- 3,175 for the building and HEFC- 88,902 for the bank and the credit union had advised me to file a police report even though it would likely end up as a paper tiger. Witnesses create reality. The director went quiet mid-sentence and did that polite step back people do when they are trying to be close without being in the frame. 2 parents tilted their heads at the papers when I laid them on a kid's table, next to a stack of construction paper that said, "Welcome, owls." A father I recognized only as the guy who wears running shoes with jeans muttered that he worked in IT security and those notary services sometimes get spoofed. A woman I think is a nurse because her scrubs always look freshly pressed shook her head slowly the way people do when they hope you stop before you break a rip with your own words. Lena's mouth moved. She asked if we could talk outside. She said that none of this was what I thought. She touched the papers like they might burn. I watched our daughter hold up a bead triumphantly and then drop it, and rolled in a perfect arc on the row of cubbies like a comet avoiding gravity. The witness who mattered most wasn't a parent. It was the night custodian, Manny, who had seen Lena's car in the alley behind the school on 3 occasions when she said she was at work because the teachers had joked about her car being the little outback that could, always squeezing into impossible spots between dumpsters and delivery trucks. He had waved once, and she had waved back with a take-out bag in her hand. He told me this quietly when I went back a week later to pick up our forgotten lunchbox and added that he didn't want to be in the middle of anything, but he also didn't like lies near kids. Independent witnesses make your heart do a thing like a skip beat and then are bound to catch up. I tried to make it tidy in my head and failed. The next reveal came from our insurance portal when I went to download health cards because I realized the expired one in my wallet had the wrong group number for the new plan. Inside my account were claims I didn't recognize and a lab result from 3 months ago marked as a non-reportable panel with a note about inconclusive paternity probability due to missing allele data. It took a minute to understand that the panel was part of a prenatal screening bundle ordered by a provider with an address near the river, not HCMC, not our family clinic. The note itself wasn't proof of anything except that a sample didn't match something as expected, but combined with the memory of an urgent care visit when the nurse had asked about my blood type and I had said O positive while Lena's chart later in the portal showed AB, a fact she always thought was cool because ABs liked to donate. Basic biology started to calculate. O plus AB equals children who cannot have a certain type. I am not an expert. I am a man with a laptop and a stomach that suddenly felt like it was trying to exit my body. I presented that medical hint not as a weapon but as a question in a letter I placed on the kitchen counter 2 days after the school. I wrote that we would pursue a paternity test for our daughter not because I doubted our bond, which is a string I could find in the dark and follow out of any fire, but because the portfolio of coincidences had metastasized into a single ugly mass that would not shrink with hope alone. I gave a date, 30 days hence, when I would go to a clinic on Franklin Avenue for an observed cheek swab and a chain of custody sample because the family law attorney I consulted for a half-hour case intake number FL-20 2981 had told me that if I ever needed my concerns documented, this was how to do it. I asked in that letter whether she wanted to schedule it together or whether I should send the notice through counsel. I said that if the test showed what I dreaded, we would discuss legal separation, custody, and support before we spoke about anything else like meaning or forgiveness because logistics do not care about emotional nuance. The storage unit keys became less theoretical after that. I went back to Bone 147 with a neighbour, Sam, because I didn't want to be inside that roll-up alone again, and because I wanted a witness if I was about to make a fool of myself. Sam is a carpenter with the kind of forms that make people imagine farm work and who has the patience of people who know what moves on its own time. We opened the envelope. The keys were labelled Atlas with a Sharpie bleach by rubbing. There was also a small USB drive I hadn't noticed because it was taped inside the flap. We used my work laptop, the one with all the finished formulas on it. The thumb drive contained 3 things: a scan of a credit card application in my name for a card I never received, an email chain printed to PDF between Lena and someone named D about transit cards and swaps, and a clip from a parking garage camera that showed Lena leading a small person by the hand toward a door marked Des. It was a grainy capture from a camera in a corner, dated a Monday at 11:09 p.m, with audio removed and the cold stamp of a time code ticking like a sprinkler in summer. The small person wore a yellow raincoat with tiny white dots. Our daughter's raincoat. My lungs did a spasm I only recognize in other men after they miss a step on black ice. I did what any reasonable person would do when morality and logistics collide inside a tight hallway. I called the building and asked for footage retention. They told me only police could request archive footage. I drove to the precinct and filed a fraud report that included the lease and the notary and the card application, and then I incidentally mentioned that our daughter had been in a parking garage late at night without my knowledge, and could someone please ask the building to preserve the past 30 days because our situation was complicated. The desk officer gave me a card with the case number that looked like a promise painted in water. PD-771,304. He said they would reach out. He said to call if anything escalated. He said to keep everything in a folder because paper still makes a bridge in a world that doesn't believe anything long enough to remember it. I told the daycare that only I and 2 other existing names could pick up our daughter and that no new names could be added without a notarized letter from me. I emailed the clinic on Franklin and set the appointment. I closed the storage unit account because the keys had already done their job. Sam told me he was glad I had let him come, and I watched him struggle to say anything beyond that because carpenters respect weight, and this was weight you cannot move with a pry bar. Lena's mother came to our house the next day because word moves through families faster than credits on a roll. She said things about loyalty and context and how stress makes people act outside themselves. She reminded me of the time her daughter worked a double to cover a sick coworker and fell asleep in the car for 2 hours in the hospital parking lot because she didn't want to wake anyone at home. She asked me if I understood what reputation means in certain circles in the church, how whispers become facts while you're still forming a sentence. She did not yell. She did not defend the lease. She said that if I loved my daughter, I would remember that love before I did anything irreversible like making a legal record that would live longer than we think. Her words were a kindness and also a trap. I thanked her. I told her I had retained a lawyer for a consult and planned to follow their advice. I said I would no longer apologize for documenting what was in front of me because the truth doesn't bruise easy when it's alone. It bruises when you push it around trying to hide it. She left with a casserole because even at the edge, people still try to feed you. The love triangle reveal, if that is what you call it when a third name enters the lexicon of your home, came in an ordinary format, a text notification on the iPad because devices go sync when you forget to turn off things that preteens know better than you. The name was saved as LH with a Minneapolis number, and the content was domestic and logistical. Thank you for covering Thursday. Do you still have my fob? Did the transit card refill? Don't forget the schedule says BLS training on Wednesday. There was a photo of a lunch from a place near Atlas Lofts posted at an angle like everyone under 40 does when they want to make a sandwich look like it requires architecture. It was not flirtation in fireworks. It was a domesticity that rents a closet in your house while you are in the backyard mowing. When I looked up Ali HCNC staff directory showed Nelly Hernandez, respiratory therapy, night shift, joined 14 months ago. That timeline slid into place like a drawer that closes with that soft closing mechanism you installed to prevent slamming. We had it out 2 nights later because the nurse mother had to watch our daughter for a practice at church, and absence is the only consistent gift in any war. We did not shout. We said the same things in different words. She says she had been helping a friend through divorce by letting him crash in a spare unit on nights he couldn't sleep at home. She said she had added our daughter to the night. She felt lonely because a sleeping child turns a strange apartment into a place you can wait out the storm without feeling like you have been abandoned. She said the lease was never intended to be permanent. She said she had used my name because he didn't want his associated with any more leases while lawyers were watching, and she thought she could manage it short term without me ever needing to know because she would unwind it after he moved on. She said the words messy and mistaken, that she had never intended harm, which is how harm gets its teeth into any family. She said the screening test was about a friend, and she used our plan to help her because it was just one swab. Not a big deal, and everyone in the group had laughed about how insurance companies pay for weird things and no one loses. She said a lot, and she said it softly until she did not, and said it hard. I listened. I did not believe much. Lies are not hard to hear. Hard is decoding the small truths inside them. I printed a formal letter addressed to her and another addressed to me. The first required a DNA test on the date at the Franklin Clinic with a chain of custody procedure. It set out that the results would inform custody planning if separation occurred and that any refusal would be considered in a worse light. The second letter was to myself and a notary that said I would not use the results to punish or to harm, only to define reality so that our daughter would not live inside a shifting frame. I kept both letters in a folder with the fraud and the case numbers and the little thumbnail of the parking garage clip printed on 8x10 paper like a ghost of proof. It's hard to describe the final reveal as anything but an avalanche after an earthquake. It came from HR at HCNC on a Friday morning when I asked for a formal letter verifying they'd scheduled shifts for the past 3 months to support the fraud case. They declined to send me details but did offer, by mistake or by grace, a redacted summary that showed several nights of leave coded as FMLA family stress. The date range matched the first lease attempt at the Atlas Lofts. It also showed that Ali had been placed on administrative leave for 1 week after a complaint regarding inappropriate use of the staff parking access to bring a non-employee onto the floor at night. No names were listed, no details beyond codes. But coding has a way of speaking plainly if you stare. A lawyer called me back that afternoon after I left a message 2 days prior. She had the tatami combo people who do this a lot. She told me I had done the right things: freeze cards, open separate account, document with case numbers, set boundaries at daycare, schedule DNA test with chain of custody. She said to send a certified letter to Atlas Lofts disputing the lease within 10 days with copies of the fraud and police case numbers, and to place a 19-word sentence in that letter about revocation of any actual or implied agency. She said to think carefully about my next decision because courts love parents who love their kids more than their own pride and hate parents who turn their kids into weapons even when the parents don't intend to. Would you insist on burning everything down now or hold the match and ask what kind of house you are willing to save if the foundations can be shored up? If you were me, would you demand the test before all else or stay still to avoid colouring your child's memory of a season in anger? The day of the test was bright and stupidly beautiful for what it carried. Franklin Avenue had the usual pulse of people who look like they are always going somewhere more important than where they stand. The clinic-weighted room had a plant that did not know it lived near an implosion. The nurse with a calm face swabbed cheeks and labelled vials and sealed packages and clipped metal in a way that sounded official enough to calm anyone not already drowning. Our daughter did not cry because swabs tickle, and she giggled at the way they brushed her gums. I signed chain of custody lines the way people sign at car rentals, not reading, because I had read too much this month and nothing had saved me. We went to bakery on the way home because life is uncreative about being out of balance, and I bought a cookie the size of a salad plate so she could hold something without thinking. In the days that followed, I did not do anything heroic. I kept showing up for clients, a man with a sander and a playlist and a need to occupy his body. I met with the bank manager and sat in a small office that smelled like tuna while we read through the notary details. They told me the card used for the rent was likely opened at a pop-up desk at the big box store around the holidays when incentives are high and controls are theatrical. They issued another case number and told me to put a freeze at all 3 bureaus. I did. Then I set up alerts that would buzz my phone for everything that now means someone tried to borrow my life. I went to our backyard and raked leaves badly because the maple does not care that your marriage is slumped. I also made a list that both hurt and helped. It had 2 columns, things we can fix and things that fix us. One side had boxes I could check bank fraud calls, daycare notes, clinic receipts, mail sent certified, storage unit closed, extra key fobs returned, insurance portal notes printed. The other side had entries that look like sarcasm when you write them down. Trust built daily, transparency without surveillance, humility, therapy we actually attend, boundaries we don't step over themselves. That list stays on the fridge held by a magnet shaped like a banana because our daughter loves dramatic fruit. The aftermath has not been cinematic. Lena moved into the spare bedroom 4 weeks ago after we agreed that being under the same roof while lawyers drew sketches of our house on legal pads was safer emotionally for our kid than adding new addresses to her routine. She promised to end any presence at Atlas Lofts, and I let building management know that any key in our possession would be returned. The building sent a neutral letter acknowledging my dispute with a line that felt like a pat on the shoulder. We understand there may be a misunderstanding, and then continued to send payment reminders like a metronome. Lee is no longer in the staff directory. Whether that means anything beyond what it does is not my job to determine, and I try to keep it that way because vindication and pettiness wear the same jacket. Test results arrived sealed with a sticker that had a lab logo designed by someone who thinks hexagons are trustworthy. I took the envelope into the garage because a man developed loyalty to the places that watched him shake without comment. The Ring camera's little blue light was a single star in the dim. I opened the envelope with a box cutter because all my knives are in there, lined up like soldiers tired of war. The letter inside used numbers and a word that does not love nuance, probability. It expressed it in a percentage that means things when you need them to and means nothing when you already love someone. I placed the paper face down on the workbench and stood there a long time. Then I went inside and packed a lunch for the next day with crepes cut in half because no matter what papers say, some routines survive quietly because they are the story you decided to write against the plot. I don't know where this ends. That is the most honest sentence I can give. I know that I will choose not to raise my voice in her small ears. I know the bank fraud case will sit like an unread magazine and then either resolve or not. I know there will be a meeting with a mediator who will say words like best interest and parenting time and financial disclosure, and I will sign more papers because the law does not trust oral promises in our state. I know that when I walk past the creek now, the sound of the small rushing over rocks reminds me of the tank of clicking in that parking garage clip. Every second marked like a step you remember because your foot slides half an inch every time and you somehow never fall. Some nights, when the house is quiet except for the fridge sounds that always mean nothing and everything, I scroll through my case list in my phone's notes. LZ-3000, 175, FC-88,000, 902, PD-771,304, FL-22,000, 981. Numbers pretending to be handles big enough to lift a life by. I think about Manny the custodian, and Sam the neighbour, and the HR person who accidentally sent a truth coded as leave time. I think about community not as a warm word, but as a series of small confirmations that reality is what it is even when you want it to be your imagination. Would you have read the lab's letter alone, or would you have waited until you could hand it to someone and say, let's do this together even if together now means sitting on opposite edges of a couch like jurors who cannot speak? Would you tell your child now, in a way they will not understand, or later, with words that include the phrase when you were little, as if making a history softens it into folklore? These are not rhetorical in my head. They are stones I carry in a pocket. Sometimes I take them out and change pockets. Nothing gets lighter. It just changes where the weight rests. The image that began this will not let me go. The notary seal, the tilt of my stolen signature, the way the timestamp turned 4 numbers into a summons. When I close my eyes, I sometimes see that Ring camera's little blue LED reflecting in the lacquered finish of a cabinet door I am holding up to see if I missed a blemish. The dot floats like a tiny planet and then winks out when I move. The door beneath it shows a room that is mine to assemble, to sand again if needed, to hang straight if I take the time to measure twice. I stand there until the dot disappears, Then I go back inside because the work of putting things back on hinges does not do itself.